Hello, and welcome to Representative Rick Larsen's telephone town hall. My name is Joe Titino. I'm Communications Director for Representative Larsen, and I will be moderating this afternoon's town hall. And we want to thank everyone for taking the time to join us. We hope you find this call informative. Representative Larsen will be taking as many questions from constituents as he possibly can in the time that we have this afternoon. If you do have a question, you can press *3, that's *3 on your phone keypad at any time. And when you do this, you'll be placed in line to speak with a member of our staff. Staff will take down your name, where you are calling in from tonight, this afternoon, and a summary of your question. And the next time you hear your name, you will be live on the call, and you will be able to ask Representative Larsen your question. If you are streaming the event on larsen.house.gov or on Facebook, welcome. You can simply type your name, where you are from, and question below the streaming player. And as you can imagine, we'll be receiving a lot of questions during this afternoon's event. So if we're not able to address your question, you can leave a voicemail after the event, or you can send an email to rick.larsen@mail.house.gov. Again, if you have any questions tonight, please press *3 on your keypad. That's *3, or type them below the streaming player. And if you would like to sign up for Representative Larsen's e-newsletter, you can press *6. Now with that, I will turn the phone over to Representative Larsen.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining me, and thank all of you who've taken time to call, to email, to write, and to rally outside my office in response to the chaos and confusion of this current administration. I hear you, I share your concern and frustration, and I'm fighting back. I just want to give you a flavor of the magnitude of the calls that have come in. Since February 3rd, we've received 3,172 calls. Now, on average, we get 40 to 90 calls a week. So you can imagine how many calls that you have all made saying the message about your concerns. In addition to that, since February 3rd, my office has received 17,359 messages, mostly emails, perhaps some texting as well. So that is a clear sign of concern and frustration from all of you. And I wanted to do this town hall meeting to communicate to you what I'm doing to fight back. So I want to start by saying that President Trump's Project 2025 is alive and well. In its first 26 days, the administration is sowing chaos, sowing confusion, by trying to implement an agenda that the courts have already said violates the Constitution and breaks promises to lower costs for working families and small businesses. Remember that the president said he was going to cut energy prices in half. Well, just here in Everett, where I am today, gas prices have gone up 10% since Inauguration Day. 33 cents increase at Rucker Mart, down on Rucker, and 41 cents at the Broadway Safeway. So that's 10% gas increase since January 20th. The cost of food, eggs, meat, things you buy at the grocery store, has gone up nearly 2% over the last month. So already no effort to lower costs for working families and small businesses, but rather to focus on a pretty extreme agenda. And I've heard your concerns and the concerns of the community leaders throughout my district. For those who follow my social media pages, you may have seen my latest Recap with Rick, featuring community leaders who emphasize how cuts to job-creating infrastructure projects, cuts to hiring at understaffed VA clinics, cuts to health care at community health centers, and cuts to student loans and grants will all hurt our family, our friends, and your neighbors. So why are Trump and the GOP doing this? Let me be really clear. It is not to cut spending. In fact, the budget resolution coming to the House of Representatives floor will cut taxes by $4.5 trillion while only cutting spending $1.5 trillion. And that tax cut, much like the one in 2017, will go to the richest Americans and the wealthiest corporations. Thinking back, in 2017, the tax cut there, 83% of the benefit went to 1% of all Americans. So they're not cutting spending, they're only changing the budget around to help pay for a massive tax cut. It's really clear that's happening. But Democrats are fighting back with unity and purpose. Now, first, as the lead Democrat on the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, I've taken several actions to push back against this Republican ripoff. We've sent a letter to Secretary Duffy at the Transportation Department about the infrastructure freeze that is freezing dollars right now that otherwise would go to job-creating infrastructure investments. I signed a letter that rebuked the late-night purge of inspectors generals, the folks who are in charge of rooting out corruption and fraud in government. We sent a letter last week, or earlier this week, to Secretary Duffy on the halt of the EV charging station program, continuing to fight for electric vehicle charging stations. I've sent a letter to Trump officials about the illegal firing of 4 FEMA employees in New York. And I am pushing Secretary Duffy to continue to implement the FAA reauthorization bill that will improve aviation safety. Now, House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries of New York, in partnership with ranking members Jamie Raskin of Maryland, Jerry Connolly of Virginia, and Rosa DeLauro of Connecticut, have established the Litigation Working Group and Rapid Response Task Force to fight back against administration abuses. One thing you all may not be aware of, but members of Congress individually and Congress as an institution, we do not have legal standing in court to challenge executive orders. But Congress can and does partner with states' attorneys general, like our own Attorney General Nick Brown, to partner with nonprofit organizations and partner with unions to challenge administration actions. And right now, groups have filed more than 65 different lawsuits related to at least 25 of the unlawful executive orders, each of which are at different stages of litigation. Now, when we push back against this Republican ripoff, we win. The American people are winning those lawsuits, and the administration is losing. As an example, Exhibit A, going back to the last Congress on December 18th, President-elect Trump and Vice President-elect Vance released a joint statement calling on Congress to increase the debt ceiling in the spending package or to shut down the government. Well, we fought back, and due to public pressure, the House defeated this GOP tax giveaway to the wealthiest Americans and largest corporations. Exhibit B of upholding the Constitution. The President signed an executive order to abolish the plain language of the Constitution, the doctrine of birthright citizenship. And on January 23rd, a federal judge in Washington state blocked Trump's birthright citizenship executive order as unconstitutional, and since then, 2 other federal judges have also ruled this executive order to be unconstitutional. We're standing up for seniors and families and law enforcement. In fact, on January 27th, Trump's Office of Management and Budget issued an illegal memo freezing federal funding, including critical funding for Meals on Wheels, community health centers, law enforcement, and job-creating infrastructure projects. And due to pressure and litigation, the administration rescinded that memo. Exhibit D, pushing back against the tariffs and the tax increases, because a tariff is a tax increase. Trump has threatened to implement blanket tariffs on imports from Canada and Mexico, which clearly would raise prices on Northwest Washington families and small businesses. And on February 3rd, due to public pressure, the Trump administration paused these tariffs on Canada and Mexico, but this is only a pause. And on Exhibit E, on January 31st, the administration handed Elon Musk access to highly sensitive Treasury Department payment information. And on February 5th, after intense public pressure, the Justice Department agreed to temporarily restrict Musk's illegal takeover of the Treasury. And then on February 6th, I, along with other members of Congress, supported the Taxpayer Data Protection Act, which would stop people with conflicts of interest or without a security clearance, like Elon Musk, from accessing this highly sensitive Treasury Department payment system. So look, the public pressure is working, and I need you to continue to speak up, to speak out when the Republican ripoff hurts you and your community. And this afternoon, I want to hear from you. I want to hear from you about your concerns and ideas on how best to fight back against the Republican ripoff. I do, though, want to say that you have a voice. You need to identify your voice. You need to act. You don't have to act on everything. If there's one thing that is of special concern to you, we want to hear about it, and you need to take action too. So with that, Joe, one more reminder before we get started. Joe?
Yes, thank you, Representative Larsen. And reminder to everyone on the phone, we have a lot of calls coming in, but feel free to press *3. That's *3 at any time if you have a question, or press *6 to sign up for our e-newsletter. I also want to encourage everyone to follow Representative Larsen on Facebook. We're live streaming on there, and I've seen questions come through. On Blue Sky, Representative Larsen is on Blue Sky and on Instagram. With that, we will go to our first question. We'll go to the phones. We have Ann in Bellingham. Ann, you are live.
Hello, Representative Larsen.
Hello.
Yeah, I'm asking if the courts and public opinion fail to stop Musk and Trump, what exactly are the House Democrats going to do to stop nearly $1 trillion proposed cuts to Social Security and Medicare? And besides protest, what can people do?
Well, thank you, Ann, very much for that question. First and foremost, the potential cuts to Social Security and Medicare, should they happen, will happen as part of a budget process that is taking place right now. So you have to ensure that I, and if you have friends around the country, are calling members of Congress to express your concerns about any of the impacts that may occur as a result of the budget that the Republicans are trying to put through. With regards to the courts are working, and courts have independent authority to issue civil contempt fines against individuals in the administration if they do not act upon the court's order. So you could say, yeah, well, Trump will just ignore the court orders. He does that, or more importantly, the bureaucrats, the political hacks that he has appointed could be financially liable for actions under civil law for not following court orders. So the courts are not impotent in their independent authority to enforce the orders that they come up with. Now, we'll say none of this counts unless there is litigation challenging what the administration does, and we are coordinating with outside groups, nonprofits, states, attorneys general, and unions and individuals to file lawsuits where there is a person or a group has legal standing. So, look, there's a long way until we get to a point where your question is ultimately going to be answered. Keep in mind, elections, one, have consequences, but also the actions of presidents have consequences, and there's an election in less than 2 years for the U.S. House of Representatives, and there will be an opportunity then for the voters to weigh in on the actions of this administration. Thank you, Ann, for calling.
Thank you.
All right, next question comes from online. This comes from Teresa. What protections are being put in place to ensure tribal sovereignty and health care?
Thanks, Maria, very much for the question. I was just with the Lummi Indian Nation yesterday, as well as with the Snohomish and Nooksack tribes, nations yesterday at two different events. That one was a ribbon cutting for a new wellness center in Bellingham, Digwalich Wellness Center that the Snohomish have started. And with the Lummi, I was at a groundbreaking for a detox center that they're building, all related to health and healthcare issues that have been part of a result of historical trauma that tribal members have experienced. It's critically important that the government, federal government, as well as individuals like myself, recognize that our relationship with tribes is a government-to-government relationship, that they have, the tribes have their own sovereign authorities, not just under the Constitution, but by treaty, and that those are enforced. And that includes not just the usual custom hunting and fishing rights that we always hear about, but also the authorities and abilities to address the issues of their own members, including health care. So we've seen in a partnership working with the tribes and federal, state, and local governments that we can support individual tribes as they seek to provide health care to their individual members and members who aren't part of the tribe of their particular tribal community. So I think like anything else, the tribes need to continue to seek to ensure the government is enforcing those tribal sovereignty. I'll be part of that. But there's already some concerns being expressed by some tribes about this administration's commitment to that. If history is any guide, this administration, like previous administrations, will lose any legal challenges if they challenge tribal sovereignty.
Okay, our next question comes from Irma in Edmonds. Irma, you are live.
Oh, okay. Yes, Representative Larsen. My concern is the fact that they went into and they took information from the tax people and I mean all this information regarding your personal information like bank accounts and Social Security. Why would they hack into something like that, and what are they doing with it? And I'm afraid that they might even go into your bank account and take your savings account. Now, I heard one of the representatives say they could just swipe all that information right out. And so I'm real concerned about that. And also, I was just wanted to say that I'm just very, very worried about with Trump and his doing all this, what he's doing to the country. And I just don't think that this man is fit. He doesn't look well. He's doing crazy things. And he didn't do, at least if he could have started easily and analyzed the situation.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Irma. I appreciate it.
With regards to one more thing. What can we do to help? Can we cook? Can we call the GOP senators and try to talk to them about making them stop doing this?
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Irma. I appreciate it. So, working backwards on your concerns, last week, as I noted, we received 17,000 plus messages, 3,000 plus phone calls. That same kind of input needs to go directly to the White House. I'm mostly on the side of the folks who have been calling. The folks who have been calling want us to push back against the administration, and I'm already on board with that. I think that the administration needs to hear from people around the country as well by calling directly to the White House switchboard. With regard to
that's fine and dandy,
Irma,
I can't even get in there. You can't even talk to anybody.
With regards to President Trump and his fitness for office, he was elected. The Electoral College decision was made, and now we have to deal with that and fight back as hard as we can. Whether or not he's ill or fit to serve, I'm not qualified to say if he is or isn't. I am certainly qualified to push back against his efforts to cut money for job-creating infrastructure, to cut community health care funding, to cut Medicaid and Medicare and Social Security. That's what I'm going to focus on. With regard to the Treasury and IRS, that's why I voted for support the Taxpayer Data Protection Act, which will limit access to people without security clearance, including Elon Musk. Your questions are really good questions on the data, Irma, because we don't actually know what Musk and the Muscovites have done with this data or are doing with this data. We don't know if they're keeping it, if they're looking at it to use it to make government more efficient, which they say they're doing, but no one can confirm that. And until we can confirm that, I do think we need to assume some of the worst on how they're using the data. So we're going to continue to push on that and use our tools that we have in Congress to do that. We're certainly looking out in Congress for any sign, any clue that the data that they're accessing from the Treasury Department is being misused, is being used illegally, is being used for personal benefit. So I just want to assure you that we have the tools to do that, and we're looking hard.
All right, next question is from Keith. Keith, you are live.
Good afternoon, Representative Larsen. I'm concerned about a couple of things. Protecting programs like WIC, like SNAP, like Head Start, and also protecting our neighbors, our immigrant neighbors that maybe have family members who aren't protected or who are working on their status. I know people who have like political asylum cases, and deportation for them is a death sentence back to their home. An example is a person I know from El Salvador who had to flee, leave everything behind, gang violence, and I'm really concerned about what's going on.
Yeah, Keith, where are you from?
I'm in Anacortes, Washington. I work in Skagit County.
No, I got it. Yeah, I just wanted to know where you're from. Yeah, Anacortes. Yeah, great. Thanks a lot for calling. I appreciate it. And these are very serious questions. The first three, you mentioned WIC, SNAP, and Head Start, and I'll get to the immigration question next. But, yeah, those are programs. Like, for those who don't know, WIC is Women, Infant, and Children, and that's a program that supports new mothers who maybe don't have other services that they can count on to support them to raise their child in a healthy manner. SNAP is the old, it's a name, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. It's the food stamp program. And Head Start, for those who don't know, is an early childhood education program. These are all programs that support families in our neighborhoods. You may not know because people don't advertise it, but you might have a neighbor or two neighbors that are on food stamps, and they could be using SNAP benefit to supplement their shopping at the store. They could be using their SNAP benefit to supplement going to a food bank. And hungry people live in our communities. Hungry people are our neighbors. And the SNAP program exists to support them so they can focus on other things like their work, like their families, like their home life. The WIC program is critical to ensure that an early investment into new moms so that their new babies are healthy. That's an early investment that pays off much later in life because we have healthy children growing up in our communities. And Head Start is an early childhood education program that is extremely important, giving kids a hand up on education. All these are critical investments for this country that are successful investments into people and are at risk. They are at risk, as Keith has noted, because of the budget proposal that's in front of Congress right now, in front of the House. With regards to immigration, we need secure borders. We also need to ensure that folks who are in the United States who maybe don't have who are undocumented or and who are working, who are paying their taxes, who are making some effort to learn English, they're involved in the community. Those folks, I want to stay. I want them to stay in the United States and eventually become U.S. citizens. Because who doesn't want to become a U.S. citizen? We have a great country, and we should encourage people to, or at least show off what is the best about the United States. The administration's deportation proposals, again, there's not a lot of transparency. They say they want to get rid of the, quote, worst of the worst by going at only deporting criminals. We do know anecdotally that the deportation activities are going after everybody, regardless of any other crime they've committed. Under Obama, I will say, under President Obama, they did focus on deportations of folks who had committed other more serious crimes, and they documented that. I think that's a reasonable approach, but again, there's no transparency with this administration that they're doing anything but trying to sweep up folks, and it's scaring people in the communities that I live. Both people who are citizens and people who are maybe here on a legal status and have a legal, what we call them a legal permanent resident, as well as folks who are undocumented but who are working in our communities and paying taxes. So we are. I don't have a good answer for you, Keith, on what the end game is going to be on this. We do need to have an immigration reform law in this country that ensures not just a secure border. We want to have borders that are secure. There's no doubt about that. But we also have to have a much more rational immigration system so that people can have pathways to enter the United States legally, and that system does not work.
Thank you.
Thanks, Keith.
All right, our next question is going to come from Susan in Bellingham. Susan, you are live.
Hi, thanks for holding this town hall. I have some link questions, but what do you think the changes are going to be in the damage done, namely to the Department of Education, and how that will affect Washington students and teachers, and the changes to the Endangered Species Act, Clean Water Act, and Clean Air Act? Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. Just taking a few notes. So with regards to education, it is early days. The administration has been clear they want to get rid of the Department of Education. I don't know what they think we're going to do about student or about Pell Grants, the number one source of federal financial aid to help qualified students afford college. You get rid of the Department of Education, you get rid of that. I don't know what they think they're going to do with supporting schools that need federal help to ensure that every child has a chance at a good education. And for those who follow us closely, I'm talking about the Title I program. But essentially, it's just ensuring that school districts, no matter where they are, and kids, no matter where they go to school, have an opportunity at a good education. That's all that Title I does. This administration doesn't have answers. All they want to do is to say they're trying to cut something and take credit for cutting it without recognition of the damage it's going to do long term to the investments in this that we make in this country to young people. And so I'm not ready to predict the damage, Susan. I am saying that just this last week, I've had school directors in. So think of the elected school board members. I've had representatives from community colleges. I've had representatives from four-year colleges in my office. No one is saying anything good comes from abolishing the Department of Education. The administration, again, sowing chaos and confusion, scaring people unnecessarily, and ignoring the real damage that they're doing and could do to the investment that we make in young people with abolishing the Department of Education. I'm going to leave it at that. There's a lot else going on in the environment, both clean water, clean air. I know they want to do permitting. They call it permitting reform, which is essentially a moniker they use to bypass any permitting, any consideration of ensuring that the environment is protected, that we're cutting pollution as opposed to creating pollution. Again, we've got some early days and a lot of chaos and confusion to sort through from this administration. Frankly, all to the detriment of moving this country forward. And we all want that. And this administration's Project 2025 rollout is as disastrous as Project 2025 itself.
Okay, our next question comes from Kathy, who her question is, I'm sure Representative Larsen is aware civil service employees at Naval Air Station Whidbey Island received a resignation buyout email, as I'm sure those at Naval Base Everett did as well. Does Representative Larsen have any words of encouragement, or is he aware of any actions being taken to protect these employees?
Thanks, Kathy, for the question. I'm trying to understand, Joe. Is Kathy saying it was the buyout letter?
Yes, it says resignation buyout email. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right. Yeah. First off, no one has to take that. No one has to take that. I'm sure I do know that some people took it, and I'd be interested to see the demographics of those folks. Those folks who've been there, those folks who took that might have been there, might have been working 30 plus years in the federal government and were ready to retire anyway, and so there's an opportunity for them to take that, and that would be perfectly understandable for folks to do that. It's really now getting to the point though where the administration wants to start cutting to the bone of the civil service. And let's not talk about civil service. Let's talk about the people who are providing services, as Kathy mentions, working at Naval Air Station Whidbey Island and at Naval Station Everett. People who are providing services in support of the women and men who serve in our military. The women and men who serve in our military depend upon civilians to do the work so that the military folks can focus on directly on the national security mission, and the civilians focus on services to support them, which is just as important in getting the national security mission done. And so the administration is, in my view, and this same story can be told in any sort of agency or any sort of department in the government. The administration is just really trying to cut people for their own sake and not really looking at what work is, in fact, getting done on behalf of the American people. Also, it's important to keep in mind that these women and men the administration is going after are just like a lot of us, a lot of people I represent, middle-class Americans getting up every day, going to do their job, and doing it well, buying groceries, taking their kids to soccer, sports, or plays, or ballet, or whatever their family is interested in, just like everybody else. And the administration is targeting these folks for the simple fact that they've decided to serve in public service, to serve in helping provide and deliver services to people. And that doesn't make them, in my book, doesn't make them bad people. It makes them pretty important people, in addition to the important work that is done in the private sector and in the nonprofit sector as well. But this administration has no respect for the people who work providing services in the government. And so I just think my advice, as Kathy had asked, asking me directly, my advice to you is stay on the job, continue to do the great work that you do.
Thank you, Kathy. And to put it in perspective, we have over 400 questions online so far and over 200 folks waiting in the queue. So there are a lot of questions to get to, but the next one we will get to is Riley.
Joe, before we get to Riley, I do want to warn people. I can't tell you that. I can tell you I don't know which 200 of you or 400 of you are going to get an ask a question. I can also guarantee we are not going to get to all 200 questions in the queue and 400 online. But yes, let's get to the next one.
This one is from Riley and Anacortes. Riley, you are live.
Hi. So my question has to do with the fact that we are in a seismic zone. At some point, we are going to get a giant earthquake off our coast. And what if that happens in the next 4 years with Trump there? It seems like he's dismantling FEMA, and I hope that the state can do something to insulate ourselves and, rebuild when that occurs. And also, my second question is, it sounds like he's trying to dismantle the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, which is what insures our money in banks. And I was wondering if you knew anything about that or if he's actually going to go forward with that, because that's pretty scary.
Yeah, thanks, Riley. I hadn't heard anything about the FDIC or Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, but for everyone, as Riley noted, that's the federal banking agency that insures your deposits up to a certain amount. But he has and is going after the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, or CFPB. This is the bureau that was set up several years back in order to support consumers who had complaints against financial institutions, and he is seeking to dismantle that. I think that has been, again, delayed thanks to a judicial action, but we're certainly tracking that as well. With regards to, I think your question about earthquakes is really about FEMA and their effort to dismantle FEMA or to abolish it. But first off, the Federal Emergency Management Agency is an agency that Congress created. So the president can't simply abolish it, much like the Department of Education. He just can't say it doesn't exist because it exists in the law. And so they would actually need to change the law. Second, there are reforms that are necessary at the Federal Emergency Management Agency. I'm on the committee and the lead Democrat on the committee that oversees FEMA, and we have some bipartisan concerns about FEMA to improve it, to reform it, to improve it. But the president's call to get rid of it is unfounded. The president's call to hamper it is unfounded. The president's blaming of FEMA, and importantly, right, it's about people, blaming the people who work and who volunteer for FEMA as being the cause of the problems for folks who are victims of disaster is wrong. It's unfounded. The disaster itself is the blame for the problems that people have, and we're getting more aggressive disasters, more extreme weather events, more extreme wildfires, more extreme hurricanes. That is causing more damage, and the dollar amounts show that over the last several years. There's just an increase in the damage calculated by the dollar amount of damage. And therefore, we need a stronger FEMA. And we can't devolve this to states because disasters just don't hit a state. Hurricanes usually hit several states at one time. States can't afford this. The reason why we have a Federal Emergency Management Agency is in part because local governments and state governments couldn't afford the cost of response to disasters. So, I think, as being on that committee that I'm on, I think we're going to look at FEMA. We're going to seek to reform it, make it work better. But this conversation was taking place before Trump was in office. It was taking place before Hurricane Milton and Hurricane Helene. It was taking place before the LA wildfires. And we need to move forward on it. And I think we will. I will say that the current person who's in charge of FEMA is wholly unqualified to be in that position. And I and several others have a letter to the Government Accountability Office asking some basic questions about the qualifications of the person who is currently running FEMA and whether or not his qualifications actually even qualify him under the law to do the job he's doing. So we're seeking to hold the administration accountable as well. Thanks, Riley.
All right, next question is from Peter in Everett. Peter, you are live.
Yes, hello. Thank you for holding this town hall, Representative Larsen. My question has to do with how can both sides of the aisle work together to do the best for all Americans? So, for example, right now the Trump administration is trying to reduce the number of employees in the federal government, and I think they believe there's some good reason to do that, to cut costs and reduce the deficit and things like that. And so those are real impacts for people who are going to lose their jobs. So is there some way for everybody to work together to do what everybody wants done and do the right things for our country, with both Democrats and Republicans working together? Because
thanks, Peter. Thank you, Peter. Appreciate that. If the Trump administration wasn't following the Project 2025 agenda as closely as it is. Remember in the election last year, Trump would say he had no idea what Project 2025 is, and he doesn't know the people who wrote it. Well, the guy who wrote it is going to be is the director of Office and Management and Budget. They're that office, probably single most influential non-elected person in government is the head of the budget office, and he wrote a lot of Project 2025. The second is, even though Trump said he had no idea what it was or hadn't read it, you can literally go to the chapter and verse in Project 2025 and relate it exactly to what the president and his people are doing agency by agency. It is a dismantling of government, Peter. It is not a reform of government, and I'm making this case because given this, it is hard to find a way to work together with the administration when their goal is a dismantling of government. I'll go back to what I said. They're not cutting programs to cut spending. They're not getting rid of people to cut spending. They're doing all this to create headroom in the budget in order to pay for the tax cuts for the richest Americans and wealthiest corporations. Anyone on this call can doubt me on that, but if you only look at the budget resolution, the House budget document that the House Republicans are working on right now, that's exactly what they're doing. A $4.5 trillion tax cut is what they want to do when they only plan on cutting spending $1.5 trillion. So it's not just it's increasing the deficit by $3 trillion and helping to pay for a $4.5 trillion tax cut by cutting spending. It's not cutting spending. It's finding money to pay for a tax cut. That's all it is. So again, it's not that I don't want to work with Republicans, Peter. I do. It's hard to find a way to work with them, right, and the president when it is really clear what they're doing. They're not interested in working with Democrats. In fact, they brag about it. My colleagues brag that they got the trifecta. They won the House, they won the Senate, they won the presidency. They have the majority in the House, the Senate, and they have the presidency, and they brag about it. And okay, my point is, like, if you have the majority, then let's see what you can do. Let's see if you can get to a point where you're not shutting down the government because you can't agree even among Republicans. Because that might be the point where they finally come to Democrats and say, we need your help. But right now, Peter, you might want us to work together, and many others might want to. It's not a Peter thing. A lot of people might want to. I can tell you, Republicans aren't asking Democrats for help. And they're not taking any offers for when Democrats offer help. So, in this case, it's going to take three to tango, and there's so far no dance is taking place. That's disappointing. It's my read. I think it's a pretty accurate read. Having said all that, I'm on the Transportation Committee in Congress. We are trying really hard to be the island of partnership in a sea of partisanship, working on job-creating infrastructure projects, working on bills that help create jobs, like building roads, bridges, highways, transit, a rail system, or clean water and clean wastewater systems, just the nuts and bolts of it. But even that is coming under strain because the administration is freezing these dollars that would otherwise go into hiring women and men doing construction in our communities. And but I'm fighting that too. I'm fighting for those jobs as well. So I just don't think it's as in the current environment. It's just not as simple as are there ways? There are ways, but people have to be willing to take the offer of help. And right now, the Republican Party is not doing that. There may be Republicans on the line, and I'm sorry that the party, at least in D.C., isn't reaching out.
Our next question is from Dean in Bellingham. Dean, you are live.
Hi, hello. Yeah, so my question is in regards to trans rights. As you know, an executive order went out in January, recognizing only 2 genders. And as a result of that, some of the trans community have lost their passports and their ability to travel. How are we going to protect ourselves and our human rights if we can't even get representation?
Thanks, Dean. I appreciate that, and this is an area where the state's attorneys generals are really acting on behalf of people because they have the legal authorities to do that. As I noted earlier, individual members of Congress and Congress as an institution can't sue to stop these executive orders. We have to take legislative action, and so I do think our own state is sued the federal government on this point about passports and identification and how people are identified in their passports. And also our state is sued on the executive order that would ban gender-affirming care, which is healthcare. We just need, it's as simple as calling it healthcare and not much else. And so our state is doing that. I've signed a letter as well to the State Department, to Secretary Rubio on the passports issue, because I know that I represent a lot of people, including folks who have passports where there's the gender identity they've chosen is not male or female. So I'm taking those actions. Again, it's 26 days in the administration, and fighting these legislative battles is going to take longer, and fighting the legal battles will take longer as well. But I want you to know that I'm engaged in that fight on this front and many others.
All right. Our next question is going to be from Darla in Birch Bay. Darla, you are live.
Thank you so very much for holding this conference so that we can share with you our concerns. It's really difficult to focus in on one question when there's just this scattershot of devastating things going on. I have been very concerned about the USAID demolition that's going on, and the people who are around the world who are starving and having their medications interrupted because of the actions going forward. What can you do in the House of Representatives to prevent them from destroying the agencies that you have created?
Well, yeah, thanks, Darla. I want to address your first point about the scattershot. The administration is throwing spaghetti at the wall, and I think it's important to know that. And they're seeing what is going to stick, and what we in Congress will fight on, and what states attorneys general will fight on, as well as nonprofit groups and unions and others. So they're seeing what's going to. They want to see what's going to stick and what they have to fight on. We need to be sure we're fighting on all the as much as possible and on the right things. Because if we win on a few things, it could help win on many other things. Because it's make it easier to win on many other things. And so that's why House Leader Jeffries set up this task force with Jamie Raskin of Maryland, Jerry Connolly of Virginia, Rosa DeLaura of Connecticut, a litigation working group and rapid response task force to fight against the administration abuses. And so that's how we're addressing the scattershot. With regards to USAID, right now, I don't have very good news for anybody on USAID. The administration has sought to dismantle it. The problem the administration is going to face is that they're going to need a USAID at some point. They're going to need an agency affiliated or within the State Department that actually does the work of the U.S. Agency for International Development. They don't know it yet, but there will be circumstances that come up that they're going to wish they had something, they wish they had the U.S. ID or something like it. But right now, it is not in good shape, and there's not a lot Congress can do, Democrats or Republicans, to push back on it, except for, I will say this, we still have to do a budget for the fiscal year 2025 and then get ready for fiscal year 2026 for the annual budget of the government. And I think the administration is going to be surprised about what we include in the budget and budget proposals in the end, even from Republicans, because those things are going to be those things will run counter to what the administration wants to do. There will be some effort by some Republicans to include in the budget things the administration does not want, because it's good for those Republicans to have those things in the budget. And we're not there yet. You know, I don't. If you ask me what things, I couldn't tell you, but in 24 plus years of experience, I can tell you there are Republicans who support things that the administration doesn't like, and those will be reflected in the budget. Regarding USAID, I don't have very good news for anybody. I do know that at some point this administration will wish it had something like a USAID, and will will fund whatever it is they're funding in order to do that, in order to take the action that a USAID would have taken.
Our next question came from online, and like Representative Larsen said, we're getting a lot of questions, but there will be an opportunity for you to leave a voicemail at the end or to submit your question to rick.larsen@mail.house.gov, and we'll give those instructions at the end. But the question is, what are you doing to protect the FAA from decimation by the administration?
Thanks online for that question. So the Federal Aviation Administration is the regulator of safety of air travel, and truth be told, it's been a really rough couple of weeks for the FAA and for air travel. We had 67 people die in a plane crash, a helicopter plane crash in Washington, D.C. 10 people in Alaska died when a 10-person caravan crashed on the ice in Alaska. A pilot died in Scottsdale, Arizona, as well, and the 6 people in the Learjet in Philadelphia died. So it's been a rough couple of weeks, and I think it's important to speak in support of the employees of the Federal Aviation Administration who are supporting the investigations, as well as the National Transportation Safety Board, led by the chair, Jennifer Homendy, who you probably see her on TV a lot because of these tragedies. That work is taking place to uncover, in each of those circumstances, what the probable cause and contributing factors were in each of those crashes. Now, with regard to the employees at the FAA, I have fought for and successfully fought for a large number of FAA employees to be included in the public safety exemption on the federal hiring freeze. So when the president put out this federal hiring freeze, they made exceptions for national security, some law enforcement, and for public safety. I don't know if it's at least within aviation, there's probably nothing more public safety oriented than that man or woman in the air traffic control tower, or the aviation safety inspector, or the of the airplanes, or the folks who do inspections of airplane parts. There's also the folks who do the certification of parts in airplanes, and they need to be included in that public safety exception. There's a lot of work that we gave the FAA last year when we passed the FAA bill, the Federal Aviation Administration Authorization Act of 2024. A lot of work we gave those folks to better incorporate things like drones in the airspace and this electric vehicle takeoff and lift, the role that commercial space is playing now. And we need people in those seats to evaluate the safety implications of these new users of the airspace. And so my argument, to Secretary Duffy of the Transportation Department, is that the FAA employees need to be totally exempt from this because everyone is playing a part. Because the number one goal, the number one mission of the FAA is safety, and that's everybody's job there. So they all ought to be exempt. Before we go to the question, another question, I just want to note that when I started that answer, 1,835 people were on the call. That number's been a little bit higher, but we've also had 13,044 total attendees since we started. So I can tell you this, folks. I don't ever want to do a live town hall where there's 13,000 people. So these telephone town halls are a real valuable way to do a lot more outreach than I could ever do successfully if I was doing a live town hall. It's great to have everybody on. So Joe, next question.
Next question is going to be from Haley in Bellingham. Haley, you are live.
Thank you so much. My question is about what are the Democrats doing as far as counter-propaganda measures, or is anything being done to sort of re-educate from the lies that MAGA has spewed?
Thanks, Haley. I'm not quite sure I understand where you want to go with the question, because I can say that I had someone ask me the other day about why aren't Democrats saying more about X or Y, not X, but like why are they saying not the social media platform, but why are they saying something more about this other thing going on? And I said I just saw one of my colleagues on MSNBC talking about that very specific thing. So I don't know that I'm not sure what you mean by the counter propaganda or whatever, what have you, because I do know that members of Congress in their specialty area are on national cable news shows pushing back against what the administration says. I also know that they're on locally, as I was did an interview yesterday with Cairo TV. They're on locally pushing back against the lies and the misinformation and disinformation that's been going out. I've been pushing back on the administration, as well as others have been, against the administration when it comes to, for instance, the role that employees at the Federal Emergency Management Agency are playing, the positive role that they're playing, that they've been responsive to people at Hurricane Helene and Milton, in doing the best they can given the circumstances that exist after those disasters. So, and that's all coordinated. Now, I would I don't know. I'd recommend folks spend time listening to Democrats and independent pundits speaking, as opposed to just listening only to the administration, because we're out there. Democrats are out there and have the opportunities. Not a lot of opportunities on Fox or One America Network, but a lot of opportunities on CNN and MSNBC and on local stations.
Yeah.
Joe?
Okay, our next question is going to be from Laura. Laura, you are live.
Hi. I am wondering, Representative Larsen, if and when there are cuts to Medicaid/Apple Health, does the state, how will that go out? Or does the state have a contingency plan in place that would, one, alert everyone on Apple Health if they got cut, but then two, does the state have funding to keep Apple Health if it was cut by the Fed? Just basically how much funding comes from the Fed versus the state, and how would that all go down?
Yeah, that's a great implementation question, Laura. I don't have a good answer for you, but I can give you some background. In Washington State, for basic Medicaid, it's I think the federal cost share has been about 55%, and the state share of the cost has been about 45%. For the additional work that was done through the Affordable Care Act, those folks who are covered under, say, an Apple Health or some other plan, I won't focus only on Apple Health, there are other plans, I think the cost share is as high as 100% federal. And
Okay.
yeah, so you're covered under state Medicaid program like Apple, but the federal cost share is 100%. So what that means is here's how it's going to work. The House Republicans are saying in their budget to a certain committee, you have to find over 10 years. You have to find, I think, on Medicaid, $800 billion in cuts, so about $80 billion a year in cuts. Now that's going to, if it happens, it's going to filter out through the Medicaid program state by state. And then states are going to say, well, we as a state, we have X amount of money, and we're going to have less from the federal government. So that means we can only cover, instead of this number of people, some less number of people. And or states will try to fill that gap. Some states might be in a position to do that and won't do it. Some states might be in a position to do that and will do it. Some states may not be in a position at all financially to do that. And so I can't answer the question for you about how that's going to filter down, but that's sort of the decision making that's going to take place. In the end, what is going to happen is that fewer people will be able to get health care through an Apple Health or through a Medicaid program because there are fewer dollars available, and that person's circumstance will not have changed for the better, so they could have a different, private insurance plan only. So that's the reality, and that's what it means when I say people are going to get hurt. People are going to lose their health care. People are not going to have access to health care. It is a bit of a trail. It's a bit of a story to tell to get to that point. But that's how it's going to happen. And frankly, there are people I'm served with in Republicans who know that and don't care. And there are a fewer number who don't realize that it's going to happen. And they're going to be shocked when it does.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of pain and suffering with that. And so because Medicaid, it covers disability, right? Because I'm 29, I'm disabled from full body trauma with that. But would that be separate? Like disability falls under Medicaid, correct?
Well, there's Social Security disability income, SSDI. That's under Social Security. But I don't know your personal circumstance, and I would caution you about sharing your personal circumstances on the phone here with 1,000 people listening. But I do, if you want to email my office, and we can get you a more particular answer for your particular circumstance, and then we can generalize. I would appreciate that a lot. So why don't you email my office at rick.larsen, L-A-R-S-E-N, rick.larsen@mail.house.gov.
Okay, perfect. I will do that. Thank you so much, Representative Larsen. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Laura.
Our next question is going to be from Jamie in Bellingham. Jamie, you are live.
Hi, Congressman Larsen. Thank you for standing up to the administrative coup d'etat that is underway in Washington, D.C. We support you in your efforts to do that. I would like to know how you will lend your support for a permanent ceasefire between Hamas and Israel, particularly in light of the latest threats from the current administration to ethnically cleanse Gaza. Thank you.
Thanks, Jamie. Thanks, Jamie. First and foremost, I want to see the hostages released that are still there, and I don't. And as bad as it sounds, this administration is not going to support a permanent ceasefire, and isn't going to respond to Congress at all that supports permanent ceasefire. Ultimately, a group of Democrats and Republicans have to be a centering force on the particular issues in the Middle East. And what I mean by that is we can't lose sight of what the bigger, longer-term vision is, and we can't let the administration or the current government in Israel off the hook for that. And that vision is a two-state solution where Israel and the country, presumably Palestine, but they can pick whatever name they want for it, but that they live securely within secure borders. They live safely. They're not at war, and there's development investment that goes into that country, so that they can build that country. Right now, that's Gaza, and the area of Gaza, and the administration's dumb, idiotic, stupid comments about redeveloping Gaza as whatever he called it, the Riviera of something. It's dumb. It's idiotic. It's not realistic. It's not his business. And his comments that other Middle Eastern countries should just take all Palestinians is not a solution, permanent solution either. So, Jamie and others, we're nowhere near getting a permanent ceasefire there. Truthfully, with this administration or with the current government in Israel, it's difficult, I know, to hear, but that's kind of where it is, and that's my opinion about what this president is saying, as well as what my vision is for that region. Thanks.
Thank you, Jamie. Our next question is from Rebecca in Blaine. Rebecca, you are live.
Hello. Thank you very much for holding this town hall. So many of us obviously appreciate it. So I have actually two questions that aren't entirely related, but I'm hoping you can at least give us a short answer. What, if any, infrastructure projects in the state of Washington have had federal funding frozen? I'm thinking there are some, but maybe you can name some of them.
Yeah,
and the
sure.
second question was a little bit bigger picture about what happens if Trump doesn't recognize the court's ability to find executive actions illegal. We're concerned that Congress won't impeach him, and are we ready to close the government down for long periods of time? Just what will happen? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. So I can point to several projects. On the first point, what the federal funding freeze has meant for infrastructure funding. One is in Anacortes. The Port of Anacortes received a $63 million grant through the Clean Ports Program under the Environmental Protection Agency. They received that award. They signed an agreement with the government, a legally binding contract with the federal government to begin receiving that money. And the portal, that is the ability to access that money electronically, that is a system that they use, is closed. So they can't actually receive that money to begin the redevelopment of a very, very underutilized, underdeveloped property in the Port of Anacortes, Guaymas Channel waterfront. It's a big project. It's got private sector involvement, public sector involvement. It's everything. It's everything a federal government person would want to have happen because of all the partners involved. And when it does happen, it's going to be a great project. And yet it's currently frozen. It's a lot of money, but also most of that money goes in the pockets of people who are doing the construction on that job. So this is about people not going to work. It's about people being cut off from the ability for these jobs. So that's a big one that we're tracking. We're tracking two more at the Port of Bellingham as well. Similar types of projects, but much smaller dollar amounts, but similar types of projects. With regards to Trump and the courts, I'll just go back to what I said and remind everyone at the beginning. Congress itself and individual members of Congress don't have a legal standing in court to sue the president to stop, but we do have the power of the purse. The reason why we don't have legal standing is because we write budgets, and we can give a executive money, we can not give them money, we can do all sorts of things. We have a lot of tools. And so we have a rapid response task force working with state's attorney general, with unions, with nonprofits, There are 65 separate lawsuits that have been filed on any number of executive orders and presidential administrative decisions. The courts, and this is the important point to get to Rebecca's answer as a long prelude, but the courts, federal courts, have individual, independent authority to enforce their court orders. People are going to say, well, what if anyone ignores the court order? Trump isn't the only one in government that can ignore a court order. Any head of the agency, of any department, of any agency, could also be found to be ignoring a court order. And the courts have individual, independent authority to file, to levy civil contempt fines against these individuals. And I'm not talking about a traffic fine of $100. I'm talking about fines in the hundreds of thousands of dollars for not acting on the court's order. And again, individually against a person. And so that is a pretty heavy cudgel that federal courts have, this independent authority. So, I think we need to get away from the narrative that the Trump administration is ignoring the courts, because frankly, in 26 days, it's been shown that they aren't ignoring the courts, first and foremost. Second, the narrative also needs to show that federal courts have independent authority to enforce the court orders with or without Congress. And so now none of the cases are at that point yet. And my guess, again, is the administration is going to throw spaghetti on the wall and see what sticks. I won't ask anyone to be patient. I know I have to be patient to see how all this stuff goes out, while I'm also working as a member of Congress using the levers and tools that we have in Congress. Thank you.
Our next question is going to be from Charles. Charles, you are live.
Oh, hi. Thanks a lot for holding this. My question has to do with the SAVE Act. I'm very concerned about how this is going to impact women's right to vote. It seems to me that the Republicans are obviously attacking women's rights, and I know that this bill has been introduced into the House, and I'm wondering if there's a specific plan to do away with it and not let it pass.
Thanks, Charles. Well, if it's on the floor of the House, it's going to get a vote, and I can vote against it, and I will vote against it. And it's not just about the person's name at birth, the proof. So the SAVE Act has two elements, everyone. This is about voting. One is a voter ID. The second is the person's voter registration name needs to match their last name that they had at birth, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, clearly not a really well thought out piece of legislation. People get married and choose to change their name. Suddenly they've got a new name, and they would be in violation of the SAVE Act. They wouldn't be able to vote. That's a ridiculous outcome. I'm not surprised that my Republican colleague Chip Roy is the prime sponsor of this. He has ridiculous legislation all the time. So there's a very practical problem with the bill. On the voter ID part of the bill, a lot of states have voter ID, like you have to bring an ID to vote. Well, we have vote by mail in Washington State. So does Colorado. So does Oregon. And other states have some element of vote by mail as well as in-person voting. In order to register to vote, you have to show an ID. And then that ID, that identification is checked. And you can be tossed out of the voter pool if your identification doesn't match who you say you are. And so, although we don't have a voter ID law in the state because you would have to self-verify, which you do when you sign your ballot, you are verifying through an affidavit on your ballot envelope that you are who you say you are. And there is a way to test that. If your signature does not match the signature that is on file with the local auditor's office, your ballot will be pulled out and will not be counted until you verify that the signature is your signature. So we have an ability to ensure fraud doesn't occur, even though we have vote by mail. And so we don't need this national voter ID law for federal elections. It just isn't necessary. States individually do it. I don't support that, but I don't live in those states. I live in my state. And in my state, our vote by mail system works, and we have a way to check for fraud in our vote by mail system. So we don't need the SAVE Act for that reason as well. Joe?
Yes, and this is going to be our final live question we take from the queue, but for the 500 people who have questions online, the more than 140 who have are in the queue or waiting with a phone call, we really appreciate your phone calls. We'll have instructions at the end on how to leave a voicemail or contact our office if you did not have your question tonight, but we will go to the final question.
It's from Joe. This is Joe. This is Rick Larsen. Again, for everybody, please send your question in. We want to answer them. So I hope we get 640 questions sent to the office so that we can answer them the best we can. And my staff wants those questions to come in too. I'm sitting with two of them right now. They got big smiles on their faces waiting for those questions to come in. Please send them in. Joe.
Yes, and that final question will go to David, calling in from Clinton tonight. David, you are live.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, we're good, David.
Oh, good. Hi. Thank you, Rick Larsen, and your staff. I got a chance to see you earlier last year in Coopville when you did an event there. It's hard to even know where to begin. And I think my overall, I guess what I wanted to say is it feels like we are living in unreal, surreal times. And that there's just like every single day, if I, look at the paper, the New York Times or even Fox News or anything, it's just bizarro land. And, I hear the president say things and I go, how can anybody, regardless of your politics, believe any of this? And yet it just keeps going on and on and on and on. So what I feel is that myself and I think maybe a lot of people, maybe everybody, I go between being, outraged and being depressed and just kind of going, sort of like walking around kind of numb. So part of my question is, one, besides, the practical things, what sort of, if you can give any advice to like, how can we keep feeling positive and not being overwhelmed by this? I mean, literally, this is madness. This is madness. And the other part is you talked about contacting the White House. I know a lot of people are calling your office and Cantwell's office and Murray's office, and I'm kind of going, well, why should I do that? Because you already know what we are saying. Is it still helpful to contact you, or should we be contacting the Republicans on the Republican side, or who besides the White House?
Thanks, David. Thanks, David.
Yeah.
First. You can, if you call someone who's not your representative, they will refer you to the person who's your representative, or they won't take your call. So it doesn't really do any good to call other offices. They'll just ignore you because they don't represent you. The person in the White House, whether or not you voted for that person, whoever it is in the world, it's the White House, and I just hope that the 17,000 individuals who called or sent messages to me are doing the same to the White House, because the White House needs to hear this. That the White House needs to understand that the president's not living in a vacuum. He lives in the United States of America, and that people are watching what he's doing and will hold him accountable to it. And so, yes, I need to know that you either support what I'm doing or don't support what I'm doing. I do need to know that. You can call me. You can call the office. You can email. Last week when we were slammed with calls, everyone was all hands on deck, took all the calls, but then we couldn't get other work done, which is like, that's the deal. I'm not complaining, but that's just a fact. If you want to call and have me support something or not support something, then you can just call and leave that message with the staff person who answers it, and then move on to the rest of your day. It's hard for us to process 3,100 calls in that span of time with the number of people I have and all the other work we're doing. So I do need to hear from you, but you can email as well. And email is probably more effective, because you know what we did last week? We did a video message, basically a video response back to 6,000 people. And I did a video, and we were just able to send it right out to people immediately. And if we get phone calls, it takes longer to get that information into our database system. But if you email, that information goes into our database system immediately, and we can get a response back to you sooner and more efficiently. So if just kind of, it's important to hear from you. It's also important. I know you don't want to call the White House if you didn't support the guy, but there's still people there who are supposed to take your calls. On the first question, David, look, I'm going to continue to press on the practical aspects. You all have a voice in the activity, the thing that's most important to you. You need to find whether that's a local nonprofit you're working on or whatever, and your energy should go into that group as well. And can I just recommend that people take a little bit of break from this once in a while? It isn't necessary to watch the news. The news will find you. It finds me all the time, honestly. And it is important that you do take a little bit of a break from the news of the day. It's going to be there the next day, and take a break and do something that's for your own behavioral health. I do it all the time, but the news is going to find me, and I know it's going to find me. So, and I got to respond to it. But I still try to find that time to step aside from things. But you combine that with taking practical steps about the things you love to do and you like to do. That's going to be a great help. Look, we've been through this administration a little bit, not exactly, but before. And there's an election in 2 years. Actually, there's an election in less than 2 years for the U.S. House of Representatives. And I can't be too political on this phone, but I'm saying there are opportunities both to act now, and then the voters as well will have a chance to deliver a message next November as well, and they will. I'll do my part to try to get them to say one thing, and others will do their part to try to get them to say something else. But that's meantime, I've got work to do. I'm going to do it on your behalf. I'm going to do my dead level best to preserve the job-creating infrastructure projects, because jobs are good. Healthcare access for people, and do my part to preserve that. Preserve the support for law enforcement that's getting cut, for our veterans that's getting cut, for education that could be cut as well. There's a lot of work I have ahead of me on your behalf, and I'm going to do my best to do the best. But I'm very pleased, very excited. There was such a great turnout on this call. Very much appreciate it. And before I turn it back over to Joe, I want everyone to know that this is Joe's last town hall for me. Joe's leaving the office to go work for a senator from another state. And I want to thank Joe Titino for being a member of the team and helping to coordinate this telephone town hall, as well as the many previous telephone town halls we've had. Joe Titino.
Representative Larsen, thank you so very much, and thank you to everyone that joined our call tonight. If you were not able to get your question in this afternoon, as we mentioned, you can leave a voicemail after this event. There will be instructions once we hang up from this call. You can also send us an email at rick.larsen, that's Larsen with an E, at mail.house.gov. You can also visit larsen.house.gov for more information. We also encourage you to follow the representative on his social media pages. On Facebook, Representative Larsen is now on Blue Sky and also on Instagram. And please do follow our YouTube page where Recap with Rick is posted once a week. So with that, again, we really appreciate you joining tonight's call, and we hope you have a good rest of your weekend. Thank you.